Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information.
Good morning, Guam, and thanks for starting your day the KUAM way. We're going to get right into it. Someone I haven't seen since last year. The Executive Director of the Commission on Decolonization, Melvin Won Pat-Borja. And so we took a little break for Christmas Eve, and we're right back into discussing on decolonization, and we wanted to talk about decolonized economy today.
Yeah, I think the economy is obviously the biggest concern for people when we talk about self-determination and decolonization. Those are the most common questions that are posed by our community is, what's going to happen to our economy? How's it going to work? Why should
Are we going to go back to living in grass huts?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think what I thought would be helpful for us to talk about today and kind of frame it with some of the conversation from the FANHITA conference. We invited the economist from the Bank of Guam, Joe Bradley, who actually is he produced the only economic study for Guam around political status, but it was created 20 years ago. And so it was nice to have him featured and have him talk about political status and the economy. And so I thought it would be helpful for us to kind of talk about how each political, just in general sense, how the impact of each political status on our economy, the potential, the risks and rewards, and the value of economic development towards decolonization, the potential impact it has on it, but also the standalone value of developing our economy and how they kind of benefit each other.
Right. Okay, so we're going to play this clip. This is from the FANHITA conference. It's economist Joe Bradley.
So with other nations around us, better safe than to be sorry. I won't go into the horror stories. Protection from outside aggression will be absolutely necessary because there's no way that we can have the bombs and the tanks and the planes and the guns and the ships and all of those things that are necessary for an adequate defense infrastructure here. Social welfare programs and other assistance, any available programs during and after the transition would be quite costly. They would probably not be federally funded and may ultimately rely on extensive internal funding and external non-governmental organizations to avoid severe socioeconomic stresses. I'm sorry, but that's what I anticipate in the transition to each of these three statuses. John? Regardless of which political status Guam chooses, there will be economic disruptions. Any change that occurs will include disruptions. Statehood provides the greatest certainty and would have the shortest transition period, but it would leave Guam's economy in very much the same position that it is today. Free association provides less certainty and more risk. The negotiated status, it also limits the latitude of Guam's future economic potential because we would have to be in arrangements with the United States for foreign affairs and defense. The prospects for safety and security remain fairly high under that set of agreements. Continuing trade and investment relationships will generally be maintained. It may take a little while for things to settle, for things to stabilize, but probably not very long. The bottom line, though, for free association is that the investment relationships that we would have, the economic control that we would have would be far more than what we have today. Independence carries a much higher level of uncertainty and risk, and it also would give Guam far greater control over its economic destiny. And when I say far greater control, I mean a lot more than free association and certainly a lot more than statehood. None of our economic development decisions would be guided from the outside other than by necessity to cooperate and collaborate with investment and trade partners. The transition phase is likely to be the most disruptive under independence. And returning to stability may take a much longer period of time. And I'm not, again, 1 year, no, 5 years, no, 20 years, maybe 25 years, maybe. I don't know, I can't predict, and 25 years from now, I'm not going to be making presentations like this. Thank you very much for your time and attention. It is a very, very...
Very, very interesting. So he kind of unpacks, in almost a cursory way, the impacts and the disruptions that'll come to the three states.
Right. And so if you're interested, the full video is on our YouTube channel. It's also on PBS's YouTube channel. But what I really like about this is really the summary of his talk on each. He goes through each political status. He begins with our status quo,
Right.
and about the challenges, right, which we talked a lot about previously. But what I like about it is that he's very upfront about the reality that there will be disruptions to our economy. I don't think that's a, we should not glaze over that reality. It's fact. Any change in political status will disrupt the economy.
Right.
But I think that the point that he was trying to make was that we know that there is a ceiling on our economy now under this status. With a change in political status, despite the risks and despite the disruptions, each of them have give us a greater potential for growth than we currently have. And I definitely encourage people to watch the full breakdown. It's not even the entire thing. It's very
Right.
limited, but in this part of it, what he's really talking about is the risks and rewards, right? So with statehood, he talks about how it's the clearest, most stable model. It's the one that has the least risks.
Right.
But it also has the least potential for growth. Free association is kind of in the middle. It gives you a little bit more potential for growth, a little bit more risk, a little bit more uncertainty. Independence, the highest potential for growth, but also the biggest risk, the
Right.
biggest uncertainty. But each of them, I think it's clear that there is a greater potential for our economy to be stronger, to be more stable, but it's an investment in our future. And so I think that what I think is really important for us when we talk about decolonization in our economy is for us we have to come to terms with what our economy is like now.
Right.
And how our economy is based now. He also talks later in his speech about how we know that our economy is very tourist based and very military dependent. There's a point where he talks about how there was a lot of growth or a lot of political status movement during the 80s because our economy was probably in the best shape it had ever
Right.
been.
And so people were dealing from a position of strength where they felt
Right.
comfortable and they would be more willing to take a gamble.
Right, and that's what I think is important. That's the next clip that I thought we would go into, is where he talks about this idea that when we have a stable economy, it makes us more capable or more ready to have this political status conversation.
Right.
And I think that that's the value of economic development. I don't think that we should think about decolonize first and then develop our economy, or develop our economy and then decolonize. I think that they work cyclically, you know what I mean? They help each other. And so we have to do both at the same time.
Right.
In order for us to really maximize the value that it gives to us.
All right, so we're going to play this next clip again, discussing decolonization here on a group chat with economist Joe Bradley.
I think that one of the successes in the late 1980s in the referendums passing the Draft Commonwealth Act, a lot of that was made possible because of economic conditions in Guam at the time. We were undergoing the greatest economic boom that we had since shortly after World War II, with all the base construction and so forth. We had hotel construction at the time, and our unemployment rate went to 0.8%. That's pretty low. And people were making good incomes. We've always been very close to the bottom of the per capita income spectrum within the United States, right up there with Mississippi and Alabama. But during the late 80s and early 90s, we rose into the second quartile. There were 25 states that had lower per capita incomes than Guam. people vote with their wallets, people vote with their feet, but people also vote with their bellies. And if we're comfortable economically, it would very likely create a better foundation for making decisions on political status, on decolonization, that one way or another we would have to live with for a long time. Under free association, Guam would indeed.
There we go. Important stuff, diversifying the economy. So obviously the two pillars, tourism and military. How do we move away from that? And what are some of the ideas that we have?
I think that's a huge question that a lot of people want to know. But I think the first thing that we should recognize is that it's clear that we all know that our economy is really rooted in the health of our tourism industry and the investment by the Department of Defense into military activity. So he talks about how in the 80s, when we were going through the Commonwealth era, a lot more people were very involved because our economy was in the best shape it had ever been. During that time, we're experiencing a huge boom in military construction as well as hotel construction. And so again, those two things, right? Those two industries were really driving our economy. He talks about how low our unemployment rate was, how high our per capita income was. And so during that period, because people are comfortable, they are able to make these decisions. And so I think for us, that's the important thing, right? Is that we know that our economy is not, it's okay, but it's not great. And it could definitely be better, right? And so
Which I mean, it kind of when you put it in perspective, it kind of explains that some of the voices that we're hearing in the decolonization conversation and what they're saying, and maybe it's because the economy isn't.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that. One of the things I think is important to note is that when we base our economy in these two things alone, these are very volatile markets. They're very susceptible to taking
North
hits.
Korea threat.
Right.
Or we've seen the closure of with the BRAC and the closed NAS. So.
Absolutely, and then even with the buildup, right? The buildup was supposed to bring in all of this money into our economy, but we've seen that the construction is not what we thought it would be, right? The impact on our economy is not what we thought it would be, and so we know that there are, whenever there's a shift in perspective in the priorities of the Department of Defense, it affects how much money is being pushed into our economy, and so we're really at the whim. And so I think that one of the things that we're looking at when we talk about decolonization is how do we create a more sustainable economy, a more stable economy. And there's a lot of one of the trends now in global economics, and especially small system economics, is they call it a circular economy, right? Where we're building things that are sustainable. Like there's this great company that's been getting a lot of play from Pompey that makes reusable, or they recycle wallets made out of banana leaf. Right. And so it's cool. They create. It's a small business, but they create industry.
So he hires a guy to do.
Right, and everything is coming from home base, right? And so we have a lot of opportunity, even though Guam technically is not a resource-rich country, right, or place, but we still have ways that we can use what we have around us to create economy. And so I think the important thing is that we have to develop our small business in Guam, create, communities, values in our communities where we are supporting each other and creating systems that are beneficial to us. I think that a lot of ways our tourism industry is a very draining industry, right? These tourists come in and they consume a lot and they create a lot of waste. And these are things that are, they're good because they pump money into the economy when they're buying things, but at the same time, we have trouble dealing with the waste, we have trouble keeping up with the demand, and it really, impacts our environment in a negative way. We see also the impact on our social settings, but even just reframing the way that we deal with tourism and our perspective on how we create policies around tourism that are sustainable for our community, that benefit us. Like Palau, I think, is a really great example for anyone who's been to Palau. When you go to Palau, they always tell you don't make sure that you pocket $50, right? It's because you got to get out, and that's their green fee. They charge you $50 to leave.
And so we can't do that here because of the FAA, and so we're restricted. And I've always thought of that, like, why don't we do it? I've traveled around, been to so many countries, paid that exit fee. which
Yeah.
goes to whatever. And I
Yeah.
mean,
It's
you know, here we have like millions of tourists coming
I know
along.
we
and
hit the
it'd be
million
great.
mark a couple
Right.
times.
Yeah.
$1 a tourist is $1 million in our economy, but
Right,
you know
yeah.
that's not an option for us. But you know I think that right now what it is that we recognize what the system is now. We know what the challenges are now. I think that when we think about decolonization, we're thinking about solutions. How do we impact it on the long term? But we also know that there are certain things that we can do within our economy currently. I mean, Palau just banned the toxic there's a sunscreen, right?
Right, yeah.
That kills coral.
Yeah, no, you know, I mean, when we talk about economics, and it's not reinventing the wheel. You know, we
It's
don't need
not.
to do anything. Where there's plenty of examples. I mean, we mentioned Palau, and I mean, an independent nation. And I've always thought since I was a young boy that you know it's good enough for Palau. Why isn't it good enough for Guam?
Right.
I mean, so we could just look and see good examples that we can follow. I
Right.
mean, on both ways.
Yeah, and so there's there's a lot of things that are happening in the Asia Pacific market now that we can take advantage of. You know, there's a lot more traffic in the region, and you know there's also traffic going within Micronesia that we I think working collaboratively with our neighbors, working collaboratively with Asian countries that that we have access to are helpful. I mean, obviously there are limits because we don't negotiate on a foreign policy level, which is it definitely important for us, which is obviously an argument for us to decolonize. But currently, we know that we cannot continue this trend where we depend solely on tourism and military spending. We got to find other ways to increase our revenues and to bring money into our system. But I think that the value of the conversation on decolonization is that we have to decide what do we want. Because we know that every option in change of status gives us more potential for growth. I think that if we are being realistic about our future, we have to grow and we have to create a system that is going to be more sustainable. So it's either we do it now or we do it later. But either way, we have to invest in the future. So the conversation really becomes: do we want a model that's gives you more certainty but less growth? Do we want a higher risk, higher reward? And that's all a part of the conversation, because every one of them will impact our ability to stimulate our economy and grow our economy in a different way. And each of them will have different solutions. So even in a state model, we will have the state will, or the union will really dictate, the country will dictate our foreign policy, but then it also lifts things like Medicaid caps, right? And now we don't have that same federal budget ceiling.
Right.
But in the same breath, right, if we switch to another model like a free associated model or independent model, then we undoubtedly have to replace those funding sources. But it's not impossible. There are ways to do it, and it's been proven in several different examples around the world. And so that's really our challenge, right, is that we have to start to put out new models or current models that are in existence that can be applicable to us. And that's what I was excited about, to have Joe Bradley be on this panel and kind of talk about his experience. I encourage people to go out and check out his study. It is dated, but I'm excited to say that Joe Bradley is one of the scholars who is working on our new self-determination study, and he's handling the econ section. And so we're really excited to see how he's able to think about 20 years out what has changed and and what is new. Like, for example, it's responsible for us to talk about our medicinal and recreational marijuana policy, right? We have this policy change. Clearly, it's going to affect our economy on all levels, whether we become a state, freely associated, or independent. I think the community has already spoken and saying that this is what we want, and so it's responsible for us to assess what is the impact of that industry on our economy. And it affects a lot of things. It's not just locally or internally, but also tourism. I mean, realistically, if we once we get these rules and regs laid out and it's the system is moving, it's going to have an impact on tourism, undoubtedly. It'll also impact, I would imagine that there's some kind of trickle down impact on the way that we deal with the federal government and the military spending. But it creates an opportunity, another avenue, another option for us to bring in other money.
Right, so this is an example of us like propping up something that, will improve the economy
Yeah, and
over
it's-
time, right?
Yeah, but it's really not. But every system will determine how it's going to work out, right?
Right.
If we know what it is right now under this current status, but we also know the growth of it, the potential for growth. In a state model, we know what it could look like. We've seen it in California, in Arizona, and the states that have pushed that legislation forward. In a freely associated model, the CNMI has already moved toward it. We can, we're kind of behind the ball watching them as they progress through it.
Right.
We'll see what the impact is on their community. And an independent model, you have other countries, like in Europe, like Amsterdam, for example, obviously they have impacts from their tourism, created by that industry. And so each one has a different way of executing their policy that is really rooted in their political status. And so, we know that if we are going to grow any economic adventure, whether it be, creating these small business adventures or having, an industry like the marijuana industry, each of them will be impacted differently by the policy and the change in our political status. And so that's something that I think we have to assess, and we have to decide how, what do we want? Do we want to, invest and gamble on this or that, or do we want more stability? Do we want a higher risk, higher reward?
Right.
But every one of them, I think, is clear that there is a higher potential for growth. We're getting out from underneath that glass ceiling.
There you go.
We got a tourism comment from the
Oh,
bottom.
nice. Hey, so Debbie Davis, thanks. She's always a big fan. Roger Martinez Buenas from Cebu, Philippines. And what else we got from Joe?
Actually, on the bottom.
I don't know.
There was another. It's actually right after this, the last clip he played. One of the things that he talks about is how he says that we need to accept, and we all need to understand that DoD's purpose is not to defend Guam. The Department of Defense's purpose is not to defend Guam, and that he says that their purpose is to defend America and American interests. And he talks about how they proved this in 1942, and how we know our history that Guam was not. I mean, the United States pulled all U.S. personnel out of Guam prior to the Japanese invasion. And so, and then even when they came back for Guam, they carpet bombed Guam before they came back in and liberated Guam. And so we know that it's really more the value of our land and our location,
Right.
and the potential of that for their military purposes. And I think that that's important because we can see how fragile even the military economy can be. In the 80s, when they were, kind of setting up and like building all these new parts of the bases, expanding, that's when our economy really was on the up and up, right? But since then, we haven't seen that kind of investment in our community at that high level. And so, and even now, right, I mean, with this huge military, it's supposed to be like the biggest military realignment in recent history. And even at that, the funding has been very kind of wishy-washy, in the beginning it's like, oh, this is going to be
That's a technical term.
I know, right? It's going to be the biggest economic boom we've seen in years, and then all of a sudden we start talking about, oh, well, it's going to go to foreign labor. Now we have this H-2B visa issue, and all of these contracts are being invested inside the fence and not outside the fence, and there's so many different things that are happening, and it's really about U.S. policy priority, right? Where do they want the money? And how do they want to invest? I mean, there's a lot of people in Congress who straight up oppose the military buildup for just economic purposes alone. I mean, John McCain, who's probably one of the most conservative Republicans I know, was adamantly against the buildup purely because of the economics of it, right? And so I think that's the thing that we have to recognize, right? Is that we cannot count, as much as we like to think that our value as a strategic location to the military is our meal ticket, right? That's what's going to continue to pay our bills. At some point, I mean, they've invested so much already, and at some point it's like, there's not much more. Yeah, right. Yeah. And so, and I think we're at that place, right, where we've seen.
I think after this buildup, I don't know what other buildup.
I know what else can we do? How much more money are they going to be willing to invest?
This is like the end buildup, I think.
Right, and then so when we think about that in that way, right, what we're encountering now is that the value of that land has skyrocketed. Considering all of the investment that has gone into these properties, the value now is exponential. But we are not capitalizing on that value as an unincorporated territory. And so even with our partnership with the DoD, you know, I mean, any change in status, we change that partnership. We change the equity of that relationship. You know, even if we want, because even in an independent model, you could still have a very close relationship with the United States. A lot of countries have a very close relationship with the United States. And so, but it puts your negotiations on a more equal footing, and I think that that's the important thing, right?
It is. It's very
Decolonization
important.
is about equity. I think that that's the sticking point for me, is that whether we become a state, a freely associated nation, or an independent country, each of them demand that we be treated as equals, that we have an opportunity to negotiate on equal footing for everything that happens on Guam, be it foreign policy, economics, defense, social welfare, whatever.
Right. So there you go. So the takeaway again: there's risks, there are rewards. In the meantime, we need to add more pillars to the
We do.
economy.
We definitely need to develop our economy. I think that Gita plays a really important role right now. I mean, you know, we have to be creative about how we stimulate our economy. I think that we're seeing a lot of growth around the region, and you know, Guam really is the most developed island in Micronesia. You know, we really are. We are such a strategic location to the military, but we are also strategic in terms of trade, in
Right.
terms of tourism, in terms of, you know, just regional mobility. I mean, the access to services, healthcare, even though we may seek healthcare and services elsewhere, there are a
Right.
lot of people in the region who come here for it, right? And same with education, right? I mean, those are also industries. Those are pockets of our tourism industry that we don't capitalize on as well as we could.
Right.
Educational tourism is real. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people who come to different places to pursue higher education because they don't have those opportunities back home.
Right.
And this is a great place for that to happen.
Well, there you go, man. This has been a very deep dive into the economics of decolonization and decolonized economies. Again, they're on YouTube at Commission on Decolonization. The Fanjita clips are all up there, you guys.
Yeah, all the episodes are out now.
You guys go check that out, and we'll be back here next Tuesday. We'll give you a little heads up on what we're going to be talking about. We kind of just, there's so many issues with decolonization. I mean, we could show up here and just not going to talk about this, so we'll figure it out. All right, so Mel, again, thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
me, man. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
The first group chat of 2020. My name's Chris. Thanks for watching. Enjoy us.
Adjust.